Welcome back to another episode of Let Me Drive. Let's get into it. This week has been recall city from some of the major manufacturers. So let's list out a few. Toyota recalled 127,000 Tundras and Lexi Lexus vehicles for potentially having debris in the engines. Now, this specifically affects the Tundra, which has been plagued with issues with engines for the last couple of years, and the Lexus LX and GX could also fall under this recall. This is specifically the engine that is shared, which is the twin turbo 3.4 liter V6 between the model years of 2022 and 2024. Then we have 406,000 Honda Civics and Accords between the model years of 2016 to 2021 being affected. This specifically is basically the wheels that came with the car, so the rims that came with the car have like a steel bolt seat issue, which is where the bolt sits to hold the rim to the car, could potentially be faulty, shaking the lug nuts loose while you're driving. And so what that causes possibly is it shakes over time, and because of the movement and because of the rotation of just regular driving, it shakes it loose and the wheel falls off, and now you have possibly a very dangerous situation. Obviously, that's 406,000 vehicles from Honda that are potentially the issue. And what they've said is that if it's an affected model, they'll change the wheels to be a wheel that's better manufactured. Then we have Stellantis also recalling 113,000 vehicles that have the turbo 4 cylinders in the Jeep. And the culprit, again, weirdly enough, is potentially sand in the engines. This time sand as opposed to debris in the Toyota platform. I'm going to assume it's, some of this is part of the manufacturing process where potentially it's like sandblasted or something like that. I don't really know, but the point is there's something else that's introducing debris or sand into these engines, causing these issues. And comparing the two, Stellantis and Toyota and Lexus and whatnot, or Toyota being Lexus, of course, Lexus being Toyota more accurately, I'm a massive fanboy of Toyota. Toyota's historically been known for their reliability and longevity, and testing something a bajillion times to make sure it is supposed to be the way it's released to the market. And you find over the other technologies that they've historically been slow to roll things out because of this methodology and because of this way that they think about things. So honestly, I'm pretty disappointed that this is something that is affecting so many of their cars. We can argue about Stellantis and how they've not necessarily been a beacon of longevity or reliability in their process, but for Toyota to be lumped into that is it sucks. Like that's a terrible thing that they overlooked in their manufacturing process. And so between these three recalls alone, that's what 700-ish thousand vehicles that have issues that shouldn't have passed the manufacturing process. And so it's just been an interesting week in terms of recalls that are detrimental to the use of the vehicle, and with the wheels also detrimental to other people's safety potentially on the road, or even the drivers or whatever, because it's an unsuspecting issue that will come up. Let's move into CarPlay. We've talked about CarPlay quite a bit in the last little while. So most notably, we had discussed that GM is going to be pulling CarPlay from their vehicles because they want to introduce their own proprietary system from a software perspective. This week, Tesla has come out to say that they want to potentially bring CarPlay into their into their vehicles to bring back buyers. Obviously, Tesla's been their market share has been kind of getting eroded over the last little while, and it's been the lowest market share. They're at the lowest market share since the Model 3 came out. So that's a bunch of years ago, obviously. And also they are facing much stiffer competition, at least in terms of EVs, from the typical manufacturers and new entrants into the market. And that competition within the EV space is only going to increase, especially if international manufacturers are allowed in. So, for example, if the U.S. and Canada allow Chinese manufacturers at some point, they have a lot of progress in the EV space that is currently blocked off in the Canadian and US markets. And so Tesla is kind of trying to see how to bring more buyers back to their vehicles. And they've recently also reduced the pricing on their Model 3 and Model Y vehicles to have more basic options so that it's cheaper to the consumer. And so this is another thing that they're investigating to see if it's finally time to bring CarPlay and Android Auto into their vehicles. This is actually something, to me, I think this is really fascinating because it's part of a bigger picture. Ford's CEO a little while ago talked about how CarPlay, especially with CarPlay Ultra and whatever it's called, the next step up of CarPlay that's getting introduced, he basically asked the question, do you want the Apple brand to start the car? And this is talking about more integration of Apple or Android, to be more integration of those brands into your vehicle, which has historically been unrelated. Obviously, back in the day, Apple experimented with bringing a car to the market, but that didn't seem to pan out. So anyway, today the average consumer has CarPlay or Android Auto integrated into their cars, just by the way of GPS or text messages or whatever it is, that all the things that CarPlay does today. And so the bigger picture here is this is all about integration into your cars, and the technology advancement of that. And obviously, like, technology doesn't really move backwards. Once the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, it only advances and continues from there. And so we are obviously moving further away from analog vehicles and more into kind of like that autonomous or digitally advanced type of car. And again, to the average consumer, 95% of the market wants a vehicle that gets them from A to B with little or no headache, ultimately. And so now, as we consider what that means in terms of technology, think of what the last couple of years has done in the car world from a technology perspective, and think of what that could look like in the future, knowing that technology and technology integration is generally exponential, not linear. So it moves faster, it gets adopted faster, and it advances faster in terms of capability and what it can do. And so I think, like every company, is to build a product. I think the motivation of every company is to build a product that has as much impact on your life as possible, be it via dependency or usage or whatever. And so if we take that example and we kind of think of that variable and consider how much the average person, and let's use adults because they're the ones that are driving vehicles, how much the average adult is using their phone or has their phone on them. Now you take that picture and you consider, what's more integrated into your life. Is it your phone or is it your car? And they both are pretty high up on the list, but I think the average person would have their phone more integrated into their life because they have multiple hours of usage per day on your phone. Your phone does everything. It does your banking, it interacts with your loved ones, you play music, you read, all the things in life. You probably interact with your phone pretty regularly. And so now you're adding an added integration to your vehicle. And so what does that mean, and what does that look like in the foreseeable future when that integration becomes more and more robust as they roll out CarPlay Ultra, and it being more integrated into the features of the car, like heating or looking at your speed or all these sorts of things, where it's just a more advanced version of what CarPlay is today. And so I think this is only going to move us faster into the a car's abilities being consumed more from a digital perspective than they are going to be from an analog perspective. And I think that we're going to start to see more and more integration of CarPlay or equivalent into our vehicles, regardless of what the brand of the vehicle is. And I think the manufacturers that are avoiding that are, I think it's going to come to an end at some point. Again, Tesla's the one that's looking at integrating this, and arguably Tesla has the best proprietary software that they have built as a competitor to CarPlay or Android Auto. And even they are saying that we want to consider CarPlay into our systems to better attract consumers from that perspective. And so when you start to unravel that, they're the best ones in the market and saying it's not enough to attract. Their software is keeping consumers away because they don't have CarPlay. And think of how many people in your life, when they're car shopping, they're like, I just want it to have CarPlay. Or you take out the head unit to have something that has CarPlay in it. Or any of these things where the average person just wants CarPlay in their vehicle nowadays, and moving away from that is going to be detrimental to the average consumer, and I don't think will be a good thing to any of the big car brands to move away from CarPlay. And so I think that's shooting themselves in the foot and restricting their usage of their product or their purchase of their product more readily. We're starting to hear rumors that Ford might kill off the F-150 Lightning. For those of you that don't know, the F-150 Lightning is Ford's, at least this newer version. There was an older F-150 Lightning, but anyway, the one that we all know is Ford's EV truck that was introduced, I think, in like 2021-ish time frame, 2020, 2021, something like that. And at the time, it was hugely heralded to be like, this is going to be flying off the shelves, so to speak. And it was for a while. Manufacturing didn't keep up. This was also during COVID, when manufacturing was kind of restricted, and people weren't, or companies weren't able to get as much supply and that sort of thing. But at least in North America, some waiting lists were as long as 1 year to 2 years waiting for these F-150 EV trucks. And in that time frame, they, like most manufacturers, the pricing at that time was pretty ridiculous. I can at least talk about Canada, where the pricing for a typically spec'd one went from, it was supposed to come out at like 59,000 Canadian, then it went to 70. Then by the time I actually had one spec'd and I was supposed to get one delivered, I was on the waiting list for 2 years myself. And by the time it was to be delivered, it went from, the way I had it spec'd was 70,000 at order. It got to $100,000 by the time it was to be delivered. And when it finally came, it was approximately 2 years out from my order date. And there were a lot of restrictions on what I could do and what I couldn't do. And so now Ford is having difficulty selling these cars. And now there's obviously a lot of variables here. People in general aren't buying as many brand new cars. The prices of EVs are pretty high, generally speaking, especially now that the credits have gone away. Although I will say, I feel like the F-150 Lightning is priced at a pretty decent market. In the US, it starts at 55K. In Canada, it starts at somewhere around 65,000. And so to me, that seems like not that much more expensive than the average EV vehicle, but I think its usage is also part of the hindrance here. Trucks are generally known for kind of like doing that you know, the rough work. Although the average truck doesn't do that. The average truck driver is not towing. The average truck driver is not going to Home Depot or their you know, the hardware store to pick up a massive shipment of whatever. Nowadays, it's just it's driven as a typical car. And so, but if you think of what the stereotypical truck duties are, the F-150 Lightning is not necessarily great at those things, nor is any EV truck today, because, you know, if you think of towing, they're not really made to tow long distances. But as a regular vehicle, it does a pretty good job, as a lot of the EV trucks do. It does a pretty good job. There, any EV is generally reliable, you know, except unless you consider the Cybertruck things where parts are falling off because the glue isn't up to par or whatever. But those things aren't necessarily detrimental to the usage of the vehicle. It's just and it's an aesthetic thing that you don't want to have to deal with if you pay $100,000 for a truck. Anyway, so. Now they're having trouble selling it, and so they are considering eliminating it as one of their products. It's probably, I mean, we're 5-ish years into production, so if it was going to get a refresh, it would probably happen in the next couple of years anyway. But what the market shows today is that just people aren't buying it enough, and it's not meeting the expectations of Ford as an organization. And so that might be something, that might be a product that they kill off, which would be really interesting given how much hype it had when it first came out. Last bit is my garage and kind of what's on the horizon. I mean, it's probably clear from the things I talk about, but generally speaking, or so right now I have the 88 E30 that I'm sitting in right now, and I love it. It's a fantastic car. I don't know what my next car will be. I'm hoping I have too many interests into kind of too many categories that I think would be an interesting vehicle to own. One, I want some sort of muscle car equivalent of a Mercedes, so effectively an older AMG. Um, I had a dream yesterday about an old beat up NB Miata. You know, I love the Miata. I think everyone needs to drive the Miata and see if they fit in it. I can't see too many scenarios where a car guy wouldn't like a Miata or a car person wouldn't like a Miata. But um, having a dream about an NB Miata and thinking about it favorably is it's probably an omen from something to say like, hey, it might be time to get back into that car. Anyway, I'm also a huge fan, generally speaking, of the Porsche sports cars, and I've been kind of like, I'm playing with the idea of a Boxster slash Cayman slash older Carrera just to kind of see. But honestly, right now that's too much car for me. But it would be really cool. I've driven a Carrera before, and I really enjoyed that experience. And I've driven an older Boxster before, and again, I just love that type of car. Smaller, nimble, has a little bit of pep to it, but just kind of the driving dynamics is something that I'm looking forward to. Honestly, if it were up to me and money was no object, I think I'd be hoarding cars of all kinds of shapes and sizes and categories, and it's probably a good thing that money is an object, because that's not a useful way to have cars, I think. So anyway, that's what I'm looking at on the horizon. I do still think that I'm going to stick to more analog type of cars. I'm generally tech forward in my life, but I'm not tech forward in cars, because when they're newer, you know, I just always think of like the old mentality of like, oh, that's more things to break down or something like that, which is maybe a bit silly, but I just like the old car feel where you're a bit more connected to the road feel anyway. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to over the next little while. We'll see what that shakes out as. I might be in this car for the foreseeable future anyway, so we'll see. But until then, I'll keep you posted of my adventures, and I will see you when I see you.